I almost knocked down that whole pile. Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I have another book haul for you. This is a used book haul featuring books that I purchased at my recent visit to Second and Charles. I love shopping there. It's a used superstore. Books, music, DVDs, games, comics, musical instruments, toys. I think I did some calculating, and my husband and I, the books that we purchased compared to the amount that we spent, I believe we averaged about $6 a book, and he buys expensive books. The first book I picked up is called Apathy and Other Small Victories, and this is by Paul Nealon. I saw it and I thought, what a cute little book. I opened it up to a page to read a line, and it said, when I was young, I used to pretend that I was a superhero. And then he said, yeah, my name was Leaf Man. You know, this is probably going to be my kind of book. All Shane cares about is leaving, but this time it's complicated. There's a sadistic corporate climber who thinks she's his girlfriend, a rent-subsidized affair with his landlord's wife, a dentist who won't stop crying, and a deaf woman who winds up dead. When Shane becomes a suspect, he'll have to clear the good name he's never had and doesn't particularly want. So I just think it sounds like a really funny, cynical kind of book, which is so my style. It's not even funny. Next, I picked up two books by David Bell, and the reason these caught my attention is because of the author. I do have at least two other books by David Bell. I have not read either of those books, but there's something about the look and sound of a David Bell book that kind of appeals to me for whatever reason. The first one is called The Hiding Place. This is the story of a 4-year-old who goes missing and is murdered 25 years in the past. And his sister blames herself because she lost sight of him and he was taken. So it's, like I said, 25 years later, and maybe the guy who was convicted of it isn't really guilty. And a stranger shows up claiming to know everything about that day. I can't say it sounds like the most original concept, but again, there's just something about the way that things are presented on the cover of a David Bell book that makes them sound interesting to me. And then the other one, The Forgotten Girl. This is about a married man whose sister is a drug addict, but she shows up at his home one day claiming to be clean with her teenage daughter and asks her brother to look after her teenage daughter just for a couple of days. And the brother agrees, but his sister never shows back up again to get her daughter. So a couple of things really determined what books that I bought at Second and Charles this time around. The first was I seem to be all about authors whose books I already own, whether or not I've read them. The other thing is it felt like everything that I picked up had something to do with Michigan. And I made myself a promise a long time ago that I would read Michigan authors, or I would read any book that I found that's a fiction but with a Michigan setting. This is the first one. It's called Bad Things Happen, and this is by Harry Dolan. This has to do with a man living in Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is home of University of Michigan, for those of you who don't know. He is working as an editor at a mystery magazine and happens to be having an affair with his editor's wife, and then his editor ends up dead. Enter the most talented detective in the Ann Arbor Police Department, who's trying to figure out if this guy is guilty of the murder or if he maybe has helpful information in finding the actual killer. The next book is another different one for me. This is called How Evan Broke His Head and Other Secrets. This is by Garth Stein, and Garth Stein wrote The Art of Racing in the Rain, which I did not read. This is the story of a one-hit wonder musician whose high school sweetheart dies in, I believe, a car accident, and therefore he finds out that he has a 14-year-old son. It felt very reminiscent of like Nick Hornby. I like the one-hit wonder musician angle. I think that will help me get through something that's not a horror or a thriller or a romance. Not too long ago, in one of my monthly Amazon hauls, I discovered that I had accidentally purchased 2 books by an author named Heather Gudenkoff. You guys were really excited that I had accidentally purchased a couple of Heather Gudenkoff books. Not going to be able to remember off the top of my head what those books were called. But while I was at Second Charles, I did find 2 used copies. The first is These Things Hidden, and the second is One Breath Away. So One Breath Away sounded really intriguing to me. It is the story of an armed gunman who enters an elementary school. And then, so it's about a teacher who has to try and save the day, I guess. I just thought it sounded really good. And These Things Hidden is about a teenage girl who's sent to prison for committing a crime that she didn't commit, but that she and her sister were trying to cover up, sort of, or hide the truth about. And so the story takes place when she's released from prison, and her sister try to resolve things. It says it's deeply moving and exquisitely lyrical. So that helped. That helped sell it. And these next 2 books I also purchased together. They are book 1 and book 2 in a series. The first has been around for a long time, and I have seen it everywhere, and that is In the Woods. Here's the thing. I hate this cover, and so I never bought it, ever. But while I was at Second and Charles, I picked up The Likeness by Tana. This one caught my eye, and I was reading, and I was like, oh, this sounds like a follow-up. So I looked and I was like, oh, it's by the author with that ugly cover. I'm like, well, I can't read 2 without reading 1. So in case you don't know anything about this book, it is about 3 or 4 children who go missing in the same woods. And only one of them is recovered. And nobody is really sure what happened. So it's about an investigator in Ireland named Cassie Maddox. And then this book, Cassie Maddox Returns, when a victim is discovered that looks exactly like her and happens to be carrying identification for one of the identities that Cassie assumed while she was deep undercover. So the second one is the one that really, I was like, ooh, that sounds really interesting. And then I was like, oh, it's that ugly book. Whatever. This is another author purchase for me. It's Never Knowing by Chevy Stevens. I have a couple of different Chevy Stevens books. And recently when I went to get my hair cut after I got married, because it was driving me crazy, but that's a whole nother video, my stylist had a Chevy Stevens book laying on her station. And I said, hey, are you enjoying that? Because I had never talked books with her before. And she was like, oh my gosh, it's so good. I love that author. And we're all reading it and blah, 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 blah. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to make it a point to get to my Chevy Stevens books. And while I was at Second and Charles, I picked up this one called Never Knowing. It is about an adopted girl who goes in search of her birth mother. And what she discovers is that her birth mother is the sole survivor of basically a serial kidnapper and rapist. And so her father is a bad dude. Sarah soon realizes the only thing worse than finding out about her father is him finding out about her. Ooh, like, doesn't that just sound really good? So I'm actually really excited to read that one, and I am really excited to read some of the other books I've had for forever. This is I Know You Anywhere. This is by Laura Lippman, and this is the story of another survivor of a serial kidnapper, or just a man who kidnapped her. It says he held her hostage for 6 weeks. She's an adult now. She has children of her own. The kidnapper is on death row, and he starts contacting her. And in a threatening way, he sort of convinces her to come to the prison and see him. He wants Eliza to save his life, and he wants her to remember the truth about that long ago summer and release the terrible secret she's keeping buried inside. The next book I picked up is called Last Night in Montreal. This is the author of Station 11, Emily St. John Mandel. Station 11 has been everywhere. Like, I've seen it everywhere. I feel like it's always on Book Outlet. I feel like I've recently seen it on BookTube and people raving about it. So as soon as I saw this author also wrote Station 11, I was like, okay, well, I'll pick this used one up, give it a try, and then see if I want to buy Station 11, because Station 11 is a book that I've always sort of been on the fence about. I don't know why. I've looked at it over and over and over again, but I've never committed to the purchase. This is the story of a woman who, when she was a child, her father showed up at her doorstep and took her away from her mother. And something about it has kind of resulted in some memory repression for this woman. And so she's very non-committal and moves from city to city and relationship to relationship. But she meets one guy who's sort of into her. They live in Brooklyn. She leaves one night and she never comes back. And he ends up tracking her down to Montreal. And then whatever happens there is the big mystery or twist of the book. I don't know. This next book is called The Return. This is by Jason Mott. This is the story of a couple whose 8-year-old boy goes missing in 1966. And then in present day, when they're both old, their son shows back up, but he's still 8 years old. And this is happening all over. A lot of people's, I guess, missing loved ones are returning as if no time has passed at all. It says haunting and a crackling page turner, but it does sound pretty interesting. It's probably aliens or something. All right, next we have the book Breed. This is by Chase Novak. And I guess I purchased this one because Stephen King says it's the best horror novel he's read since Peter Straub's Ghost Story. Well, this is the story of a couple who's having a difficult time getting pregnant. So they actually travel to Slovenia for a painful procedure that gives them what they so fervently wanted, but with awful consequences. And then the blurb jumps 10 years later and it says, the twins Adam and Alice find themselves locked into their rooms every night with sounds coming from their parents' bedroom, growing louder and more disturbing. Sounds freaking creepy. Like, I don't know. When I read that blurb, my mind goes to a bad place. But anyways, again, that's Breed by Chase Novak. And that's actually a pen name or a pseudonym for Scott Spencer, who wrote 10 novels, including Endless Love, which I just know the song. Endless Love, Lionel Richie. I'm not going to sing it. I'm a Dork. Again, this is my other Michigan book that I found at Second and Charles, Steve Hamilton's The Hunting Wind. I didn't know it at the time, but apparently this is like book 27 of 59. I don't know. I'm exaggerating. This book is part of a series, and unfortunately this book is very far into the series, featuring a detective, Alex McKnight, who I guess is a detective who's had a lot of books written about him that take place in the Detroit area. This book in particular finds Alex McKnight in Paradise, Michigan, which is in the Upper Peninsula. The next book is called The Last One, and this is by a woman called Alexandra Oliva. I thought it was Alexandria Olivia, but both Alexandra and Oliva are missing that I. So this is the story of a married woman who's participating in a reality television series competition. So think Survivor. And when she's out there in the middle of nowhere, pretty much isolated from everybody and everything, the world ends. Or something apocalyptic happens. I thought it sounded interesting, mostly because I just read A Head Full of Ghosts, which also had a reality television series element to it. But it has praise from Justin Cronin, Ruth Ware, Rosamund Lupton, all authors that I know of, and so I figured I would give it a shot. I also have a book in here somewhere by Kate White. I don't know the name of it, but that's why I picked up this one. This one is called Hush. It is the story of a woman going through a divorce, and she finds out that her husband, or soon-to-be ex-husband, or ex-husband, whatever, he is going to sue her for full custody of their children. That's a big deal to her. She doesn't want that to happen. And in the meantime, she ends up having a one-night stand affair with a man that she works with. And he dies. The morning after their one-night stand, she finds him with his throat slit. And so the story becomes about her lying to investigators and law enforcement so that she's not part of a murder investigation, because that will severely affect her ability to keep her children. And so I'm not sure how this is going to turn out for her, but she is going to try to solve the murder on her own so that she's not implicated somewhere down the line. Tangled web, people. Tangled. That's why you don't have one night stands. Bad things happen. Finally, we have a book called Descent, and this is by Tim Johnston. But this is the story of a family that goes vacationing in the Rocky Mountains, and while they're on vacation, the daughter disappears. Other than that, nothing else is revealed. It says Descent races like an avalanche towards its heart-pounding conclusion. But I have no idea what happens in this book other than a girl goes missing in the Rocky Mountains. And that's okay. You know, I guess I'd rather it be really mysterious than be really obvious, because that never works out well. So that's Descent by Tim Johnston. Okay, so that is my book haul from Second and Charles used bookstore, and I will leave Second and Charles website linked down below. They have locations in 17 states. Hopefully they have a location by you, because it truly is the coolest used bookstore I've ever been into in my entire life. So if you have any additional information about any of these titles that I mentioned, or if you have any questions, or if there's one or two in particular that you're really excited to know more about, let me know. I will try to get to those first so that I can tell you guys about them. I think that's it. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all very soon.